Loose Leaves, Peace Amidst Radical Change, written and read by Alicia Fowle. Chapter 3, Die Before You Die. I drive through a desert, and I forget the water is flowing from somewhere in the shell of grieving, the sting of trauma. There is water that says, I love you. I love you anyway. I love you suffering, dying, killing, whining, refusing. I love you. The ache to live from that love is the only thing to be trusted. That water flowing from the masses of humanity moving towards light. The knowing we have failed each other, but yet we try again. Go there. Take every jug you have. Fill every container to the brim. Let your hair loose and dunk headlong into the crystal coolness of it. Hold your breath and plunge deep. Come out only when you must gasp for air. The human hell we've created will not sink you. No one suffers forever, and no one suffers alone. Let that crack of bliss crack you wide open. Overwhelm. The tears shall remind you of the desert you once passed through, that now passes through you. 3 times I experienced the wonder and amazement and trauma of childbirth. Each time they went from the relatively sterile womb environment, dependent on that cord that connects center to mother, the cord that connects placenta organ to the cord connects to the placenta organ that acts as barrier and buffer. That organ that breathes, essentially, pulls life from mother and feeds it to the child. Suddenly this new body in air and immediate changes take place. 2 holes in the heart close and circulation suddenly begins through the baby's own lungs instead of a mother's. How I sat wondering about this today. Is there a moment? All like babies in a giant ego womb. Are we all due to be born? Is there a moment when that air is felt, that first breath taken? Is there that first noticing of the knower that resides behind this and that? A first opening into bliss, the wonder of awareness. How it aches when those holes close, when that circulation irrevocably alters course. How quickly a new normal, a new pattern of breathing wipes out all memory of suffering and trauma for mom and baby both. Does it matter what came before? Not from the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. Trauma. Experiences that do not get processed in the moment they happen. Misuse of power by another person, contributor of stagnant energy and potential for exponential growth. Anxiety, the inability to relax the mind on overload. A mismatch of the inner and outer environments. Depression, a holding down of fatigue, of fog, unrelenting emotional pain, a non-negotiable time of rest. Suicidal ideation, a cry for help, a grasping for control, an unmet need for unconditional acceptance. Addiction, coping the healthiest way you know how to cope. In my 20s, from our apartment in Seattle, from a husband and a young child, I drove off. Fueled by some unseen force that wanted to destroy me and all I had grown to love but seemed to hate, I drove amidst stereotypical relationship drama, paused when I got a flat tire. Anger and fear never left my side. I fled towards the north, unaware that I lived in the north too, enraged by the reality that there was nowhere. I could go nowhere to escape this part of me. I couldn't change the me I wanted different by parts of me that wanted to destroy me. This me that I didn't know how to accept, pushed into the darkest corners of my psyche, to the shadowy areas that screamed, quit. I found myself on Deception Pass Bridge north of Seattle. This place is beautiful, awe-inspiring, terrifyingly high. I considered throwing myself off the bridge. It seemed a real possibility. It does seem melodramatic now in hindsight. At the time, though, I was absolutely caught, like a movie that I lived out. Couldn't change the channel. Stuck on tragedy and the message I was wrong, not enough, just needed to be gone. It seemed a plausible option to just quit the body experience right then and there. Obviously, I didn't throw myself overboard that day. Some part of me did die that day. Needed to die. As I stood there looking out on the blue water, as I hiked to exhaustion up nearby trails, I let go something subtle, but enough to drive back home, do the next thing, take the next breath. When this thing called life is finally over, won't it be soon enough? Please finish the burning that's been going on all these years. The burning away of my illusions, who I think I am, was or will be. Put the corpse into a crematorium. Throw some of those ashes off that bridge. Part of me died that day. This would be beautifully appropriate, wouldn't it? I'll be smiling from the light behind the rain that pours down from the sky and mingles with your tears. I'll be smiling at you for living out my last wishes, for just still living. Now this drum's pounding in my ear. You have a right. A voice saying, I love you, now live. Since the sound of the mother's heartbeat in the womb, we've been creating living impressions of this embodied alive experience. Taking the raw stuff of sound and sight and creating meaning. And still, even as conditioning trauma makes the meaning a distorted straitjacket reality, even as you tell yourself, because, fill in the blank, I'm this and only this, I can only do this, I can only do that, I'm not okay until, fill in the blank, this happens, that happens, I change this, I do that. You're so much more than the mental projection. Michael Singer describes a transformation. Sometimes an old shed skin gets dragging behind. And that's been my transformation. It's time to step upon that old skin, move on, and see even more freedom and the lighting of the soul. No end to the mystery. I am grateful beyond words. This is not my special life. This is everyone. So I say as many times and in as many ways as I can, you have a right to your living, to life, to being alive, to make your own decisions, to creating, to even making hell with your magic. Don't worry about being a, quote, artist. Don't believe that your voice is horrid. Sure, get help, but don't take on a label, an identity of mental illness or disease. Don't get lost in the dogma or ideas of some certainty. The only constant is change. Everyone in their own unique way, through to the marrow of their bones, is making life matter. Literally. Consciousness is becoming. Art lives in the momentary living. If you can make walking to the shower in the morning a dance, if you can see the beauty in the pile of dishes, if you can hear the song and the sounds of screaming children, to capture any of that beauty, even in a memory, is being an artist, is being alive. Somewhere an 80-year-old, if they're still thinking with enough clarity, will think back on their whole life and what did it all matter? All the trips to the bathroom and glasses of water drank and meals ate and years of marriage and children and work. What we color in existence, will their heart sink? Be that person right now, in this moment. Don't let your heart down. Let it break open right now. Let your next touch to the lips be savored. The next thought of marriage filled with passion, children with reverence, work with purpose. Color the lines inside and out. There was a man. He made meaning from how forks laid in the drawer. He made real the voices inside his head, believing their threats. His guitar and dog were friends against the rest of a perceived, god-awful world. Raised in a home where demons were real and prayer was treatment for the label of schizophrenia. I can see him posing against a cereal box that said heart to heart and hear his original songs. His crush on the neighbor led to restraining order and delusions to a stolen boat. And at 44, the age I'll be this year, he took a gun to the Heart River and stopped his thinking with a bullet to the temple. What courage did it take to live that life? And how did I regret not hugging him tight enough to let him know it didn't matter? It didn't matter what twisted realities danced in his crippled mind. He still mattered. He mattered enough to live anyway. How I've had to suffer to learn that lesson in my own sodden heart. Well, it happened. The day 9/19/19 came, and I arrived to be jabbed with needles, and not acupuncture needles. I can now roll my eyes back with experience when I see a well-tattooed client acting like I'm about to really hurt them. Every middle-aged crisis sort of woman needs to get a tattoo, right? Get cracking on the bucket list, right? So I got the Om symbol for the sound of God, tattooed to my upper back. Why? Besides the midlife bucket list? Because that deception pass moment of awakening wasn't a flight into bliss, part of my journey, but more a slow crawl from the grave. At some other point in deep despair, seeing the time 9/11 and mocking myself at the emotional emergency, hence 9/19/19, I couldn't express myself in such a basic creative way. Depression, suicidal thoughts were semi-constant in my life, with some pressured overachieving behavior crusted on top. All I knew was self-destruct. And now I know and commit to life. Life unpacked, unjudged, just lived. A tattoo is permanent, but permanent is relative. It'll fade and rot with the rest of my body when my body goes to earth. This is not a tragedy. This is reality. We're not only body, we're also spirit. That young, good Christian needed to hear we're not only spirit, we're also body. The situation was indicative of a body out of balance, not cause for burning shame. The one spirit lives on and only lives now, with the substance of the physical nature form of human. We're a walking unique miracle. Who could ever want to destroy that before its time? The mind is a powerful projector screen. It does seem silly, the tattoo. I can't even see it. Yet I love it. I can tell people every time they ask, the Om symbol, the sound of God. Each of our unique sounds all at once. Divine dissonance. I'll get that look over and over again, or recognition, and make yet another friend with their heart as full as my own. Standing on the Deception Pass Bridge, back in that car at 20-some, in complete shreds, I couldn't see the idea of what it would take for me to be okay. But it held a lot of power in my life. It was God out there, a cloud of discontent. It's too heavy, too quiet, too talkative, too disconnected, too needy, too artistic, too ambitious. It was what I had heard in that diminishing tone from people who were gods to me as a child, meaning well and struggling with their own fears, saying, if this, then that. Viruses of belief passed on from parent to child, sibling to sibling. The motherboard has been wiped clear. And interesting what has sprung up from that flat plane, crop after crop of insights. Yet still a need for limits, for structure, for balance. Still a sensitive body creature that needs time to adjust and process. Being ultra aware of what I can't and am not responsible to take on of others' struggles and ideas. Loving the rhythm of morning, night, ritual, freedom. The simple, the bodily, the emotion, the still thinking. It's a human thing to do, mark this me as unique. It's a spiritual thing to do. know this me as part of us all. Now I know God's here in this heart, this body, human and spirit, dance their dance.